Here I am back in my InDesign master folder for this project, and I have my subfolders. And under the PS folder, I have copied images that I'm going to use. So the reason why they're in Photoshop is that they're raster graphics files. And so I'm going to select one and just down arrow. You can see these different pictures that I have, all kind of dating from the early 1990s for the most part. And we're going to do a couple of things with these. Some of these we're going to use directly in our file. Now, I'm saving these as a PNG format, which means the background is transparent. And we're going to look at one of them. So I'm going to open one of them. I'm going to open up the pager. Where's the Motorola pager? In Photoshop. So this is what a PNG file can look at. It's a single layer, but the way that I made this picture, this is rendered in 3D, and it has a shadow, and the shadow allows transparency over the background, which is quite nice. If I put in a white background, so in Photoshop, I go down to layers, click the little add layer button, and then I'm going to hit Command Backspace to give me white, and then I'm going to move the layer over the background. This is a way for me to double check that my image is really over a nice background. So my shadow. Shadow is kind of heavy there, but that's okay. But if this gets printed over white paper, this is how it will look. If I go to my layer, hit Command U, colorize it, do some adjustments, and I can see different color backgrounds. This is what it would look like over different solid color backgrounds. And the nice thing is that the shadow is sort of transparent and the shadow picks up the color. But that's how I prepared it in 3D. I'm going to click OK for that. I don't really need to see that anymore. So I'm just checking to make sure that this is working out okay. I'm going to close that file. I don't need to save it. And the first thing we're going to do is the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to convert these files to an Illustrator format. Now the first file that motorcycle. Now the first file that I have is a 16-bit file, and I'm going to open that up. And what does the 16-bit mean? We're going to find out. So I'm going to open that with Adobe Illustrator. And Illustrator opens. And I'm going to get garbage. And for some of you, if you have a high resolution camera, you may have a picture taken with a 16-bit or a 32-bit image, which means it has an awful lot of color information. Illustrator didn't like that. So this is what my wall clock looks like. And so the reason why, it's a problem. Okay, I'm going to just close that file, leave Illustrator open. Now I'm going to open that same file in Photoshop. And here it is. It looks like the other one. Everything's over a background. But if I go up to image mode, it's saying 16-bit. So 16-bit has basically got more color options. 32-bit has got a lot of color options. 8-bit has got the fewest number of color options, but it still ranges in the millions. So there's still a lot of colors there to pick from. And Illustrator basically, for the most part, you can think of it as flat graphics, or if you have something with a gradation, a lot of little flat graphic colors that are very, very close together, giving you the illusion of a gradation. And whereas raster, every pixel can be a different color. And television, film really makes uses of the higher bit pictures, as well as printing might too, depending on what kind of printer you're working with. But we want this to be 8-bit. So in order for me to get this, I need to select on 8-bit. And depending on the image, sometimes it'll ask you for a conversion, especially if you're going from 32-bit or if you're going from a file type that's other than PNG. It may ask you, some other options may pop up. So now I'm going to save that file, and I've already saved it, so I'm just going to close this, quit it. And I have 8-bit version here. Now I've already converted these pictures all to 8-bit. So I'm going to open in Illustrator and I can pick open Adobe Illustrator and the 8-bit version looks fine. Okay. Now let me pick a little bit more interesting looking pictures. I'm going to pick let's go back to the pager, Motorola pager, right click open with Illustrator. And I'm going to zoom in. Okay. Now it's putting the picture in Illustrator over a white background. But remember that PNG file, I didn't want to have a background. I wanted the background to be a little bit more flexible. So I've opened up an Illustrator and I'm going to create a fake background or just a temporary background. So up in layers here, go to layers. I'm going to pick a new layer and I call this background check. Okay. And I'm going to draw a square shape. So pick the square tool and it defaults to white. I pick the swatches. I have that window open. Double click, and then I'm going to just pick red because it's easy and easy to identify. Now, my layer that I made is over, so I need to rearrange my layers and drag layer 1 up. And I'm going to rename this one to be original, O-R-I-G. And then I'm going to make a copy of it. So this is still raster graphics. Every pixel is its own individual color. And we're going to do a conversion. I'm going to turn off the display. I'm actually going to lock the original and turn off the display, which is over here. And then I'm going to pick this one. I'm going to call this one trace. I'm going to call it pager trace. Okay. And I'm going to make sure that that one is turned on. And so it's still displaying over the background, but we're going to do a conversion. And so I'm going to make sure that that's selected and this option comes up. If it doesn't show up, you can pick trace. So this tracing option comes up. If I go to workspace, I can have this workspace tracing. So this is open for me already. I use this a lot, especially at this stage, so I have that window open there. And then I've selected that layer and I can pick trace image. And if I click on the little arrow next to trace image, it gives me options. And 3 colors, it's going to reduce all of these thousands of different colors, different shades of green, different shades of black, different shades of gray into 3 colors or 6 colors. 16 colors, shades of gray. I'm going to pick 16 and we can always change it. So ask me, okay, yes, I want to continue. And it's a good thing I saved the original as a copy. Now, when I trace it, something interesting is going to happen. The background is going to turn white. So even though the PNG didn't have anything in there, Illustrator was objecting and saying, hey, you don't want that. I know better than you. So this process can take a little while depending on how big the picture is. And these pictures that I picked are pretty big. So there it is. And the background is white. Now, because I traced using 16 colors, now I see it over here, 16 colors, it still looks pretty robust, but my red and my green pager dots went away. I can do that here. If I turn on the original, you can see the color green and the red disappeared when I did that. So one thing could be going in and fixing those individually. But I have these gradations. So let's say I'm happy with this because I want it to look more simple style. But I don't want that white background because I want to put it over any background that I'm doing in my project. But I still want these shadows, kind of these fake shadows to go up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to expand all these into the individual layers of the individual colors and then delete what I don't want. So now I'll go up to my trace, I pick the selection here, and then I want to pick the white arrow, the arrow here for this one's called direct selection tool. And I can pick on it. Now, there's no individual layers or shapes yet, so I need to go to expand. So I'm going to click expand, and once I did that, wow, everything got picked. Over here, you can see it says group, and that shape got turned into group, and now we have all of these layers. Now, my own experience is that the larger shapes tend to be on the bottom. The background shapes tend to be on the bottom. So I usually go there first. And we can see if I scroll back up here, in some of these bigger pictures, we can see these shapes, but then everything becomes really small as we move down. So I'll go down to the bottom. Now I'm going to click in the background and then click back on the image, and I can just select the one parts. So now I've selected this because if I can't use that tool to pick it, I have to use this direct selection tool and click on the background and then click on there. Now I'm going to hit the delete key or backspace key, and that deleted that. And I'm going to pick that one, delete, that one, delete. And I'm kind of working my way in. And because I have quite a few gradations, I got all this little garbage in here. We're going to be able to get rid of that. I'm going to pick that, pick that, pick that, pick that, pick that. Okay, so now I basically reduced my shadow down, and I could even go one more level down. Let me do that. Now I've done a lot of work here, and I haven't saved anything else yet, and experience has told me save. So I'm going to pick save as, and the name at the top is the same name as the original file, but it imported it as a AI. I'm going to call this one version 3. So I'm upgrading my versions all the time. Always always upgrade your versions. Now I have all these big major shapes over here, but I got all this little garbage stuff around. And there are some of these guys right here. So you notice if I pick some of these, they turn blue. But I'm going to loop select. So I'm going to change my direct selection tool to a lasso style. And then I'm going to get as close as I can. Delete key. Oops, I didn't want to delete. So one of the things there, I accidentally deleted the background. So I'm going to go back up here, delete or lock the background. And I want to make sure that my original is locked so that I'm only editing this trace picture. Go back up here and I can get pretty close to that guy. And I'm doing this in several steps. I've done this before, you can see. And select that, select that. And now I have to zoom in and get closer. And the nice thing about having the red background is that those little guys really stand out and they're easy to see over the red background. And if they happen to, compete with the background, I could always change the background to be a different color. Zoom back on. So now I'm going to go up to my top. And because I made all those deletions, that list on the side is a lot shorter. If I go down to the very bottom here, you can see, let's say there's one up there. And picking from the bottom tends to find all these little guys. There's another one. There's another one. I pretty much got all the stragglers. And I'm not sure if that's one or not. So I'm going to just go turn off the display or not to see if I don't want it. And if it hurts. But this looks pretty good. It's a highlight on the top left corner. My light's kind of coming from the top left anyway. So it's okay. So now I've done my cleanup. It seems like a lot of work. Okay. And maybe a little bit of work at the beginning, but boy, is it going to save you trouble later. So now I'm going to turn off the background. and I'm going to just save my file again. I'm overwriting the last version. It's pretty much the same as version 2. I wanted that. Now I have a couple of ways I can export this. I can export this just as the Illustrator file, which means nothing. It's already saved. Or I could save it as an SGV, the SVG, the vector graphic format. And both will work. And I'm going to leave it as a Illustrator file for this example. And if we look on disk, it's right there. Now, this is where my Photoshop files are. I actually want this to be in my Illustrator folder. So I'm going to open that up. And I have a subfolder called props. So now here in the original one, all these images, prop images, were in this subfolder. So I created another subfolder, and I've already done one for coffee. So I'm going to do the pager, and I can move that up. And so I want my Illustrator files in Illustrator land. I want my raster files in the raster land in the Photoshop. And this organization, believe me, will help you later. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to start importing these assets, our numbers and our vector graphics and our raster graphics into InDesign.